Good afternoon, everyone. I request Dr. Nanya to please proceed with the session. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone, again. And I'm saying that I hope everybody is healthy and safe, and we continue to remain safe and healthy. And we all are going through a bad pandemic, it's just getting tougher. So it is indeed very encouraging in these times we all are getting connected for a learning process and for capacity building through a platform like eInitiative. So that is very encouraging, and I'm very glad that we can make this happen. But helping me with that this endeavor is Dr. Vanna from Share India, who looks after the execution part. Yes, she's saying hi. And then we have Mr. Ajit, who looks after the IT part. And we also have Gaurav from Eco India, who looks after the supervision and IT part. So it's like a team effort. And today, as an expert, we have Dr. Sethi. Dr. Sethi is a senior specialist in a Department of TB and Respiratory Diseases at NITRD. And she has this over a decade experience of dealing with respiratory, all kinds of respiratory diseases, and has vast amount of knowledge. So, Dr. Sethi, if you can say hi to everybody. Yes. So we are very glad that we have her on board today, and we're really going to get enlightened. So coming to the agenda, but I would like please mark your attendance while I tell the agenda. Yeah. Thank you all of you. So today we have a case of lymphadenitis in HIV patient, and which is a very common scenario, clinical scenario that we see. So that makes it so important to discuss also, because it's such a common thing, and you can see, and it is a very common thing, and we always keep thinking whether this is because of HIV, or is it some opportunistic infection, or is it not related to HIV. So there are a lot of questions that comes because it's such a common thing that we see. But our main concern and main driving thing is that we should be able to diagnose if there's any treatable part of it. So that's what we want to give the take home message, so that there are like 10,000 things that can come to your mind, but you should not miss any potentially treatable cause for it. So it's very important to investigate and diagnose these cases well, no matter how common they are. You cannot take them for granted. So, uh, can I ask how much attendance? Can we take off the attendance poll and go ahead with the case, or should we wait for the attendance? Okay, we'll give one more minute. Everybody, please mark your attendance. Today the case will be presented from the center with NGGH Vijayawada, but the case will be presented by Dr. Vanna itself. So after a minute or so, Dr. Vanna will take over for the case presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Nanya. Now I'm sharing the case. I hope it is visible to everybody's screen. It is a case from ART Plus Center, NGGH Vijayawada, Andhra Pradesh, and it's a case of a 30-year-old male weighing 65 kg who was diagnosed with the ETB, lymph node TB, and started on CAT1 ATT in September 2020. So very interesting thing is that the patient was registered with ART Center way back in 2012, mid 2012, and the ART was initiated. The patient was initiated with Zedaland regimen, but only after a few days, that is within 15 days of starting the ARV, the patient became LFU. And after that, during the time when the patient was started on ART in 2012, his forest status was negative and his clinical condition was very much stable. It is noteworthy that patient's wife is also on ART since 2012. So, now the patient had been retrieved back to the program and was presented with complaint of pain and swelling at neck and axilla from July 2020. So patient brought back in July with the cervical and axillary suspected lymphadenopathy. He underwent ultrasound of neck and axilla, which actually showed enlarged lymph nodes with a suspected COX etiology, and had been advised for FNAC, which actually showed a plenty of neutrophils, lymphocytes, epithelioid cell clusters, and giant cells against blood mixed serous necrotic background, which is a typical feature of cold abscess. Then patient had been referred back to NGGH ART Center, And based on these reports and his clinical condition, patient was immediately started on anti-tubercular treatment of CAT1 regimen. Now, patient had been follow-up, and after within a month of starting ATT, patient was then immediately started on ART with TLD regimen because the patient was put on dolutegravir based regimen. So an additional dose of DTG 50 milligram was also been prescribed to patient along with ATT which the patient was taking since October 2020. So now the patient's serous fluid from lymph node was sent for CBNAST for drug sensitivity in November 2020. And although it is written on your screen that results are awaiting, we know that the result has come now and the patient is DEFA sensitive. And after initiating the ATT and the patient is now in ART, patient's condition is clinically stable. So on the screen, we can see that the CD4 count of the patient to when he was initiated on ART in 2012 was 317. And in September 2020, when he was brought back in the program after being LFU, the CD4 count is markedly reduced to 58. Now below that, we can see the laboratory reports, which is showing serum creatinine in normal limits. Then we have values of liver function test, serum bilirubin, SGOT, SGPT. The HB is fine with 14.4 gram%. And there is a result of FNAC we can see on our screen of bilateral cervical and axillary lymphadenopathy, which actually showed the feature suggestive of cold abscess. Then the ultrasound of neck and axilla, which gave us something of Cox etiology. The ART regimen on which, as we discussed, the patient is on is TLD OD with dolutegravir 50 milligram OD. An ATT regimen, patient is on CAT1 ATT. So today the issue for discussion is about tuberculous lymphadenopathy and how it is different from pulmonary TB. So in the case, it is disseminated to other organs, which organs are commonly affected, and possibility of patient having lymph node TB without showing symptoms of forest complex forest symptoms, that's weight loss, sweating, fever, and cough, and early signs of lymph node TB and its treatment. So here we can see these are the clinical notes for the patients where different treatment is prescribed. This is the ultrasound report of the patient. This is the biopsy. And then these are the visuals of the white card of the patient, where patient had left in 2012, we can see, and then they brought back in the program in 2020. Again, continuation of the white card. These are the visuals and pictures of the patient, where we can see the cervical and axillary lymph nodes very clearly. It's very much marked. We can see on our screen. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Dr. Vanna. You really clearly explained the case. I don't think I even need to summarize. But before I do that, can we please pull the pretest poll along? Yeah. So the case has been very well explained. It's the case of a patient, 32-year-old male who defaulted initially and then presented lymphadenopathy, and which was diagnosed with the cold abscess report, and then the patient was put on ATT. So this is a very common scenario in all the ART clinics, I believe, but we have this, no matter how much experience we have, we still fight with those dilemmas of whether is it just a simple case of TB lymphadenitis, and why is it not responding? Then things like, are we missing out something? How long should we give? So there are a lot of questions even to this simple problem. So to enlighten on all that aspects, um, so we have our expert today, Dr. Sethi, and so I will be inviting her in 1 or 2 minutes. Please kindly attend do the polling first. Attempt the polling first. Please mark your answers. Anyway, it's anonymous. Nobody's seeing it, but it's for your own thing that you need to answer them. I hope everybody understood the case well, or they want any part of the case to be repeated. If they have missed it, they can ask right now. So now I'd like to invite Dr. Sethi to kindly present our narrative.
Thank you, Dr. Ananya. Thank you, Dr. Vandana, for having me here. It's a pleasure to be here and sharing my thoughts about this topic of TB lymphadenitis. Uh, as you know, there is not much of a difference between pulmonary tuberculosis and in an immunocompetent competent person against an immunocompromised patient. However, there are few basic differences in pulmonary tuberculosis. So is the case in extrapulmonary tuberculosis, that is TB lymphadenitis, which is a very good example of extrapulmonary tuberculosis. Those differences and what are the aspects which we need to consider while we are having a patient who is immunocompromised and having TB lymphadenitis, we'll discuss through the presentation. I would request Dr. Vandana to kindly, because my screen share isn't enabled, so if you could share the screen, please.
Ma'am, we have enabled the screen sharing. So if you wish to share the screen from your side, you can very well do so.
Is it, can you see?
Yes, we can see, ma'am.
Okay. So now we'll be, as I've already discussed this, that tubercular lymphadenitis is nothing but an extrapulmonary tuberculosis. Any presentation apart from where the lungs are involved is an extrapulmonary tuberculosis. So tuberculosis lymphadenitis is the most frequent presentations of extrapulmonary TB, and it is responsible for as much as 43% of peripheral lymphadenopathy in the developing world. In rural India, the prevalence of TB lymphadenitis in children is up to 14 years of age is approximately 4.4 cases per 1,000 cases of tuberculosis. Now, what is the difference? As you know, there are certain differences of presentation of tuberculosis in patients of HIV. The risk of TB doubles within the first year of HIV seroconversion due to rapid depletion of TB-specific T helper cells. Thereafter, the risk of TB progressively increases with declining immunity. HIV-infected individuals appear to be more likely to acquire MTB if exposed, and they are also at increased risk of developing active TB from a reactivated latent infection. HIV infection is a risk factor for accelerated progression of TB following the exposure to a TB infection. HIV-infected persons starting ERT are at particularly high risk for being diagnosed with TB disease. This is likely unmasking of clinically unrecognized disease. So basically, whenever a patient who is immunocompromised, the chances of him, if he has a latent TB, infection, the chances of him developing TB while you start ART is more. This is what is called the unmasking of TB. So that is why it is always taught that whenever you have a patient who is HIV positive, he comes to your clinic, you should rule out tuberculosis before you start treatment. That is the INH prophylaxis. If you have to rule out active tuberculosis. Now, what is the pathogenesis of TB in this? Isolated peripheral TB lymphadenopathy is usually due to reactivation of disease at a site seeded hematogenously or from the lymphatic circle during primary TB infection, which had occurred years earlier. Though most cases of TB lymphadenitis occur in the setting of reactivation of latent infection, miliary dissemination with prominent lymph node involvement in the setting of primary infection can always occur, and this is more so in an immunocompromised patient, because the immunocompromised patients are unable to contain the infection on the first infection, and that is why the chances that they develop a disseminated COX from hematogenous spread, from lymphatic spread is more. This scenario can be seen. However, it is known that for primary tuberculosis, the TB lymph node is usually a reactivation of a disease rather than a primary disease. Now, what are the clinical manifestations? So, clinical manifestation depends on the site of the lymphadenopathy and the immune status of the patient. The most common presentation is an isolated lymph node. It is usually the cervical lymph nodes, sometimes an axillary lymph node. That is how they present. The systematic symptoms are usually not present if the patient is immunocompetent. However, if the patient is immunocompromised, the systemic symptoms, that is what you say, the 4S symptoms are usually present, and the disease usually has been persisting for over last 6 to 8 months. So when you physically examine a patient, what you will observe is a firm, discrete mass, or it could be a matted. A typical presentation is a matted lymph node with the surrounding structures are also involved in that. And sometimes later on, if the presentation is delayed and it is not treated right when it is supposed to be at the beginning, you can have fluctuation, you can have an abscess formation, sometimes there is a draining sinus, and there is a tract formation. So this is the various stages where you can actually appreciate TB lymphadenopathy. Initially, it starts with just a small discrete lymph node, which is mobile. Later on, as the disease progresses, the surrounding structures, tissues are involved, and it is fixed to the surrounding tissue which is nothing but the periadenitis. And this is when later on the caseation starts. You have a matted feeling. But once the caseation starts, the softening will start, and the lymph node which you are able to palpate is soft. If still untreated, this will later on form an abscess, can rupture, and a persistent sinus tract can be seen. So you should avoid that the patient lands up in such a stage, preferably because this tract is very difficult to treat and you have to eventually do a surgery. So preferably, whenever the patient presents first, it's better to diagnose as soon as you see a sign and a symptom of TB lymphadenopathy. Tuberculosis, as I've already told you, that cervical lymph node sometimes can cause ulceration, fistula, or abscess formation. Now, in patients who are TB immunocompromised, the chances that there is an isolated lymph node involvement is less, because they're immunocompromised. The bacterial load is more. The chances that the disease is disseminated is very high. So in such a case, you should always rule out any other lymph node site, other pulmonary tuberculosis. So get a chest X-ray done, get an ultrasound abdomen done. So when you do an X-ray of chest, you can have mediastinal lymphadenopathy, which can sometimes, if left unnoticed, can cause compression of the upper airways, bronchial and tracheal stenosis, and the patient can have breathlessness. Sometimes these lymph nodes, the mediastinal lymph nodes, will compress on the vocal cord, paralysis can occur, recurrent laryngeal nerve involvement can occur, and very rarely esophageal perforation is also known, but that's very rare. Now, as I've already said, that the other site lymph nodes should also be seen. So you have to get an ultrasound abdomen, see for where you can get the peritoneal lymphadenopathy. In these cases, the most common are the periportal regions. Mesenteric lymph nodes are also involved, and so are the peripancreatic lymph nodes. Sometimes the hepatic lymph nodes are involved, and this can lead to jaundice, portal vein thrombosis, and portal hypertension. Sometimes the renal arteries can be compressed externally by a lymph node, and this can cause renovascular hypertension. Now, this is what I've already told, that HIV co-infection, most extrapulmonary TB cases, if it is patient has coexistent HIV also, this patient would present with tuberculosis or lymphadenitis when the CD4 count falls below 300 cells per microliter. Amongst the patient with TB lymph nodes in the setting of an HIV patient, as we said, significant mycobacterial load is there. So you will have concomitant systemic findings like fever, sweats, and weight loss. And the chances that it is disseminated is more. That I've already told you earlier also. Patients with mediastinal and hilar lymph node involvement are likely to also have active TB. So you should always actively ask for symptoms of cough, expectoration, and get a chest X-ray done to rule out coexistent pulmonary tuberculosis also. So these are certain, just a pictorial presentation to you where the patient has a sternal cold abscess. You can see the shining skin overneath, and it is just about to rupture. There is all redness, erythema over the overlying skin. These, this patient presented late, so had ruptured sinuses, scars, all healed scars are also seen on the all throughout the neck. Sometimes they can present with scrofuloderma also. Now, once you have a patient with TB lymph node, how do you diagnose? As with PTB, microbiological diagnosis is essential to give a confirmed diagnosis of tuberculosis. So is the case for extrapulmonary tuberculosis. Example is TB lymph node. So you should have a histopathological or microbiological diagnosis for a confirmed tuberculosis diagnosis. For that, you need to have a fine needle aspiration done or maybe an excisional biopsy. So fine needle aspiration is nothing but where you have put in a needle, or usually 21 to 23 gauge needle, put in, aspirate, and preferably, and the aspiration should be done from a non-dependent area, because if you use the dependent area, the chances that the patient would the lymph node would rupture, and then you could have an abscess formation. So it should be a non-dependent aspiration. And FNAC gives you a very good sensitivity and specificity. A study which was done in Hong Kong gave a sensitivity of 77% and specificity of 93%. However, the yield in these cases is just about 70%. So, because the yield of FNAC is less than 70%, so you need to have some diagnosis, so you could go ahead with excisional biopsy. So in this, when you do the excisional biopsy, you will send the sample for histopathology. When you do the histopathology, what you see is nothing but a caseating granuloma, which is very highly suggestive of tuberculosis. But however, this again, caseating granuloma is not the only diagnostic factor. So that is why you should, for these specimens, you should go ahead with acid fast stain. You should go ahead with culture as well as CBNAT, what is known as nucleic acid amplification test for confirmed diagnosis, because caseating granulomas are not the confirmatory diagnosis of tuberculosis. They may suggest, but however, they're not taken as a confirmatory diagnosis of tuberculosis. So they have to be assisted with other tests like acid fast stain, cultures, and CBNAT reports. So as I already told, that FNAC gives you a yield of approximately 70%. However, a series has shown that the excisional biopsy gave a 100% yield amongst the patients. Now, once you have taken the sample, either it could be through FNAC or through biopsy, you need to have a CBNAT done. One, what is the role of CBNAT? That is the nucleic acid amplification testing in these cases. First is your diagnosis. It will definitely help you in diagnosis, because even with a small bacterial load, this because it is a molecular test, you get a positive report. So you have seen that the expert MTB-RIF assay study done, meta-analysis done, showed that the sensitivity and specificity was 83 and 94% respectively. However, apart from diagnosis, they also help in ruling out resistance. So in all the cases, immunocompromised cases who present to you with PTB or with extrapulmonary tuberculosis, if diagnosed, you should rule out resistance to rifampicin at the onset before starting any treatment. So CBNAT is essential. However, you should remember that CBNAT or any kind of molecular test should not be used to monitor the response or further decision of any treatment. They have for any change in treatment or monitoring, you, if needed, you should get a culture done. And earlier LJ medium, or now most of them are liquid medium, that is MIGIT. So MIGIT is the gold standard for diagnosis of tuberculosis. So any follow-up, you have to rule out by a culture rather than any newer molecular-based testing. Now, what is the role of imaging? Now, chest imaging be it X-ray or CT scan, is essential because, as I've already told you, in HIV patients, the coexistent pulmonary tuberculosis and or maybe mediastinal lymphadenopathy is very high. It is as high as 80 to 90% will definitely have some kind of pulmonary tuberculosis associated. Rarely do they have an isolated TB lymph node, because with the CD4 count less than 300, the chances of coexisting pulmonary tuberculosis as well as other morbid diseases is very common. So this is an example where on the left hand side, if you see an X-ray, this shows a widened mediastinum, that is the upper bilateral paratracheal lymph nodes can be seen. And on the right is there is small collapse where, because of probably a hilar region, hilar lymph node, there is a collapse in the right upper lobe as well. Now, what is the role of ultrasound? See, ultrasound is definitely usually not done to rule out tuberculosis. This can assist you in some way by helping you in case the lymph node is deep and you are unable to do an FNAC and excision biopsy. This can help you to localize the lymph node and take a sample for FNAC. Otherwise, as a routine, is usually not done. And if you do an ultrasound, you usually see that the surrounding tissue is involved. There is cystic necrosis, there is matting all over, and there is heterogeneity in the picture. The other test which will help you to reach a diagnosis is MON2 test, what is known as tuberculin skin test. But in patients with HIV, this is usually not done because the basis of this MON2 test is your immune status. So, because of patients of HIV who are already immunocompromised, this usually turns out to be a negative. But however, in an immunocompetent patient, 74 to 100% patients would have a positive MON2 test. Now, as I've already told you, the patients who are immunocompromised, the chances of coexistent PTB is very high. So you should always actively find for TB, pulmonary TB, and get the smear and the culture if required and if patient has symptoms. What is the role of bronchoscopy? Now, sometimes the patient has an isolated mediastinal lymphadenopathy. In that case, to make the diagnosis, you will have to go and take the sample from the mediastinal lymph node and take the aspirates and send it for the testing like CBNAT and cytology and cultures, whatever. So is the case with sometimes the subcarinal lymph node not accessible. So you have to access through EBUS. So the EBUS diagnosis has a study has shown that has confirmed diagnosis in approximately 79% of cases. But these are usually not, because you usually have an immunocompromised patient, has a disseminated disease, has a peripheral lymph node, which is more accessible. So you are not required to do these procedures. Now, once you are up to all these diagnoses, what is the treatment? The treatment does not differ. It is the same as an immunocompetent patient. It is a 6 months, as you know, treatment for drug-sensitive tuberculosis. So that is why CBNAT right in the beginning is essential, because you rule out resistant tuberculosis. If sensitive, just go ahead and start with the drug-sensitive regimen. That is the 4-drug regimen in for 2 months, followed by 3-drug regimen for the next 4 months. These patients usually duration of treatment may be needed when you get a suboptimal response, but you should always rule out resistance in case you see that the patient is not responding, and also have in mind what is known as paradoxical reactions before you decide to extend the treatment. Now, what is the role of surgery? The surgery usually is not required. Drug therapy is sufficient for the treatment. But however, sometimes you have a fluctuant lymph node which is causing discomfort to the patient. That time you need to do incision and drainage. And if the patient has a sinus tract, you can get an extraction of the sinus tract. However, these are very, very rarely needed, and the patient responds to the drug therapy only. Now, how do you assess the response to tuberculosis therapy? These respond effectively, but I have told you that there are certain cases, usually which you will see when you have started the treatment of ART as well as ATT. Toxical increase, they present to you with an increase in the size of the lymph node or maybe the other sites are additionally getting involved. And this has been seen in patients, or approximately 35% of HIV patients where paradoxical reactions are seen. Now, these usually occurs after 3 weeks of treatment or 4 within 4 months of initiation of treatment. This is something like IRIS, where there is an immune reconstitution of the patient, and that is why this is not the failure of the patient treatment, or that the patient is not responding to treatment. However, it is just a paradoxical reaction. Now, before you mention label it as a paradoxical reaction, see to it that you rule out resistance, and firstly confirm that the patient is taking regular medication. Now, this you can see the differential. Usually you have to see that you rule out non-compliance or any other infection or an alternative diagnosis, because in patients of HIV, there are usually with lymph nodes, the patients can have lymphoma, Hodgkin's lymphoma, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. So you need to rule out those cases as well as non-tubercular mycobacterial infections known as NTM is also known. If the CD4 count is very less, if it is less than 100, these are already known. So you have to be very cautious. Normally, these paradoxical reactions, if you confirm that it is a paradoxical reaction and not a resistance or a failure to the treatment, then if left untreated also, they respond to it. At the most, sometimes you may be required to give some short course of steroids. So this is just a basic about TB lymph nodes, not much difference from immunocompetent. However, you have to be really alert and look for signs and symptoms of PTB also. I'll give you certain examples, one or two case reports which will help you in understanding this pathology of TB lymph node and its treatment. A 48-year-old female initially presented with left-sided cervical lymphadenopathy. She also complained of chronic cough and no pulmonary symptoms. The radiograph, however, showed a left perihilar shadowing. Her TSC, that is the MON2, was 11 mm. Because it was dry cough and X-ray showed a lesion, and she was not producing sputum, we did a bronchoscopy. We showed that there was normal tree, and the aspirate was diagnosed as PTB and sensitive to rifampicin. HIV serology was reactive. So this is the first case A, where you have a left perihilar region, you can see. Now, after this patient responded well for 4 months, but after 4 months, there was some deterioration in her condition. She started having more cough, more breathlessness. We did an X-ray. We showed there was worsening of the left hilar region. You can see there is slight enlargement, and there is also infiltrative lesions on the left-hand side. Left upper lobe has increased. Now, while we could confirm what exactly is the diagnosis, we could do other procedures which were needed. She developed a severe shortness of breath, and there was a collapse of the left upper lobe. This is the C picture. Now, at this stage, when we did a bronchoscopy, we observed that the right main bronchus was patent. However, the left was completely obstructed by a lesion, and which was washed out. After we did the washings, we sent it for aspirate, and the washings were negative for AFB, so was the expert, did not show MTB detected. So after confirming that there was no active tuberculosis, we diagnosed it as a paradoxical reaction, started her on steroids because she had breathlessness and stridor. The patient responded well, and after treatment, this is the picture, which is the D picture, she responded well, and we could stop the medication at 6 months only. So that was at the end of the treatment. We were not required to extend the treatment. Only a short course of steroids was helpful in this case. Now, another case is a case of a 20-year-old female who presented to us in the OPD with a right cervical lymph node, and her FNAC did was TB lesion. The CBNAT done, which was sensitive to rifampicin. She did not have a chest complaint. We did an X-ray, however, and it was normal. HIV was non-reactive. After 2 months of treatment with standard drugs, the patient was asymptomatic and the lymph node was not palpable. So we shifted her to the continuation phase. However, after 5 months of treatment, she developed a left axillary lymph node and a cough and expectoration. FNAC done, which showed that AFB was positive, and CBNAT done, resistance was detected to rifampicin. So was the case in midget. Chest X-ray showed a right upper lobe lesion. Sputum, CBNAT done, rifampicin resistance was detected. So in this case, while the patient had completed almost 5 months of treatment, she developed a new lesion as well as a pulmonary lesion diagnosed as having MDR tuberculosis, and we shifted her to finally after we ruled out that yes, this is not just a paradoxical reaction, this is a failure of a treatment. We shifted her to MDR treatment and she responded well to her MDR regimen. So after these two discussions, what we understand is what are the differentials of patients of peripheral lymphadenopathy in patient of HIV. You have to rule out lymphoma, Hodgkin's, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, NTM, and other fungal infections. Multimodality diagnostic approach is usually required to make the diagnosis, and it definitely increases your yield to diagnosis. And rifampicin resistance should be ruled out right in the beginning, and always rule out coexistent pulmonary tuberculosis. If it's sensitive or resistance, whatever the standard regimen, whatever is prescribed, you can always take the help of a chest physician. Whatever the medicines which are being used for sensitive or MDR tuberculosis are equally effective in extrapulmonary TB lymphadenitis also. But however, with patients of HIV, you should be very, very careful, and you should know that something like paradoxical reactions are known. You need not worry about these. They usually respond, and a short course of steroids are usually helpful if needed. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am, for this excellent presentation. I'm sure all of us have got a lot of concepts clear after listening to her. And this is a fairly important topic, and all the aspects were covered. So I think we can now attempt a post-test poll as I open the house to open discussion. Can we have the post-test poll pulled up, please? And
Yeah,
also,
before the post-test poll, we have a few questions on the screen with us.
Okay.
Yeah, the first question is from Dr. R. Day. The doctor is asking that when was CPT started? So CPT was started, we know, before we started the ART on patient. Exact date we do not know because we do not have ART center because of some technical issues, but it was started before the patient was started on ART. And second question on the screen is from Dr. Bipaditya Mondal. So Dr. Bipaditya is asking why not disseminated TB and ultrasound of spleen and liver status. So sir, we have when we shared the case, so on the screen we have already shown the ultrasound of abdomen where the spleen and liver, everything has come normal. So if you wish to, I'm just again sharing the screen which is showing the ultrasound status. So on your screen, we can see this is the ultrasound abdomen of the patient, which is showing the normal report. So this condition has already been ruled out. But the first part of it, that it says that why not disseminated TB? So this I'm going back to Dr. Sethi. Ma'am, can we classify it as disseminated TB or not? I mean, what exactly?
See, if you have and you just see if he has just the axillary lymph node, it is one site node. You will say it is just a isolated lymphadenopathy. After ruling out other site diseases, pulmonary TB, extrapulmonary. But I think your patient has a cervical as well as an axillary lymph node, both. Right? I think he has both the lymph nodes, the cervical as well as the axillary. So in case it is a two-site disease, anyways, it is a disseminated because two sites are involved and they are not contiguous sites that you can assess. So this is a lymphatic spread anyways, and most likely in your case, because the presentation was too long, like these lymph nodes were present for almost 6 to 8 months. This is probably reactivation of a latent infection. So most likely. So this is anyways a disseminated because two sites are involved and they are not contiguous sites.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, there is another question from the district TB officer, Muzaffarnagar, and it has been asked that how long these enlarged lymph nodes can persist after we start ATT in such case of lymphadenopathy, when it is a paradoxical reaction.
See, if it's a paradoxical reaction, it usually responds on its own. You need not do. While on ATT, they usually respond. You don't have to do anything. In case it is causing any discomfort to the patient, give a short course of steroids. Like maybe 15 days steroids is good enough, and the patient responds and they go off. However, in spite of all the treatment, 1 centimeters to 1.5 centimeters lymph nodes are usually persist even after you have completed the treatment. You need not extend the treatment beyond the designated period. If it is just 1 or 1.5 centimeters, just leave it, keep the patient under observation, and hopefully he'll not report to you. In case he has any increase in the size or other lymph node enlargement, he'll report to you. But normally we've seen 6 months treatment in an immunocompetent patient is good enough. And even if there is a persistent lymph node of 1.51 centimeters, if left untreated, does not cause much of a trouble. But sometimes in an immunocompromised patient, but before you stop, be very sure that the patient has taken regular effective medication. It should not be that he has taken 6 months of incomplete medication. So you should be very sure 6 months of effective, the 4 drug followed by 3 drug regimen, whatever the doctors prescribe, is taken regularly in the effective dose, whatever is dosage is required. So sometimes, however, there can be extension of 3 months can be required, and you can do it. That is the after you rule out any resistance or failure at your part.
Okay, thanks, ma'am. I think you have answered the other part also, which is again,
In this, I'd like to add, ma'am, like you said, clearly mentioned that ultrasound, it's not usually used for diagnosis, but here where non-invasive things come into role, because like CT scan and ultrasound or abdomen, we have seen in our case scenarios for assessing the response to treatment, because extrapulmonary TB and they don't have, we have paucity of cultures, we don't know how to assess the response because node size also they regress, even the visible node size they regress, we can't culture from them. So generally I've seen from cases that these non-invasive methods then come in role, to assess the response to treatment, like CT 6 months back, CT 6 months after, then we are more confident that the patient is responding. So that's where the role of these methods come. So that's also decides the duration. I mean, duration stays 6 months, but we are just more confident in stopping the treatment then when we see the response through ultrasound or CT scans, whenever affordable and practical.
so there are a few questions more from Dr. Bipaditya. Sir, I think I can see you on screen. You can unmute yourself and ask. Sir, आपको unmute करना पड़ेगा.
Good afternoon, ma'am. Good afternoon. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Yes. Actually, what happened after completion of the TB treatment around 6 months, still the lymph nodes are enlarged in size and does not come reduce in size. So the patients also complain that whether I have been cured or not, and also we are not getting the exact like in pulmonary tuberculosis, we do test at the end of the treatment, and then we see whether it is DMC report is positive or negative. Then we consider the case is cured. But in case of lymph node TB, we are not doing anything. Like there is enlargement of the lymph nodes, and also there is no definitive proof that it has been cured. So what is the just comment on this area?
See what happens in TB lymph nodes. They usually lymph nodes disappear in 6 months. See, that's a normal way. Usually 6 months. If needed, you can extend. That I've already told you. They usually disappear. However, 1 to 1.5 centimeters lymph nodes are left, which we usually ignore. In case you anything bigger than that, and you want to be very sure, what you need to do is send the aspirate for culture. No other test would help you, because even if you do a molecular test, that's going to diagnose a dead bacilli as well.
Yes, dead bacilli. Yes.
Because the lymph nodes in almost 90% of the cases disappear. So in the national guidelines, they've not included any test at the end of the treatment. However, there are always few cases in your practice where you will see such patients where you are in doubt whether to stop or not. Get an FNSC done, send the sample for culture. If the culture shows there is growth, that you are very sure that yes, this is an active bacilli because it's growing. So then you can extend the treatment. And while you are doing the culture, you will also do the DST pattern. So you will rule out resistance to any of the drugs and then take the decision accordingly. But however, see, it is not just an isolated lymph node. Whenever the patient is failing, you will have some kind of associated symptoms, some other new lymph nodes developing, the same lymph node enlarging. So there are other indirect signs and symptoms which will tell you that the patient is not responding and the patient is failing. So you have to act accordingly. But there are certain times when the patient is having just small lymph node is left over, no symptoms, weight gain is there. So that time you can take, so that's where your clinical judgment comes in. Okay, so that is when you will decide, okay, the patient does not have symptoms, is gained weight, he's not having fever, he's not having cough, it's just the persistent small lymph node. So just leave it. Then you just can leave it, observe over time, and then the patient can come over. So that is where your clinical judgment would come over.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay, ma'am, we have on our screen other few questions from Dr. R. Day. Sir का एक क्वेश्चन तो यही था कि what to be done if the enlargement of lymph nodes happen even after 6 months of treatment. So I think that's very much answered by you. Another question is there. So Dr. Ray, sir, would you like to ask question by yourself? You need to unmute yourself. Dr. Day, can you hear us? Okay, so I think there might be some difficulty in in asking from themselves. Okay, so his question is, my first question he's asking is whether there is any difference between the outcome of the treatment if we use rifabutin instead of rifampicin.
Sorry, I wouldn't be able to tell you much because I haven't had much experience with rifabutin based regimens, so I wouldn't be able to comment on that. However, logically speaking, should not be, but then I wouldn't be able to comment on that regimen. As of the status of LAMP test, LAMP test is not usually has not come in the as a guideline for treatment of diagnosis of tuberculosis, and they are still saying that in miliary tuberculosis, urinary LAM and all are being done, and they can be helpful usually in pediatric patients, usually in HIV immunocompromised patients, but not in immunocompetent patients. So that's not a guideline in immunocompetent. However, they can be used in immunocompromised patients.
Okay. And again, is asking if FNAC signs of granuloma persist for a long time, even that is not active. So
I didn't get the question. What do you mean by FNAC signs of granuloma persist for a long time even when that is not active?
Okay, so maybe
okay, you say when you see, that is what I'm saying. When you do an FNAC and the signs of granuloma and all would persist in cytology. So again, these are just additive when you do the diagnosis. For follow-up, these signs, these features are not helpful in any way. So when you are doing the diagnostic, yes, a granuloma formation with an positive MON2 or maybe gene expert positive, it helps. They are all collaborative tests. But in follow-up, these cases usually do, these tests usually do not help you. It is only the culture which is helpful while doing the follow-up. And in follow-up, we usually do the FNAC only when you suspect that the patient is not responding. Unnecessarily just to see whether that is responding or not, you need not. No. When you suspect that the patient is failing, when you see that there is some other new lymph node has developed, that is when you have to do the FNAC. Otherwise, please do not touch that lymph node unnecessarily.
okay, ma'am. And can we do biopsy instead of FNAC? He's asking.
Now, see, biopsy can be done again. That I have told you, the yield definitely increases, but you should understand what is the why do you want to do a biopsy? If it's diagnosis, yes, go. If FNAC is not giving you the yield and you strongly suspect, go ahead. You can do an excisional biopsy and make the diagnosis. We've already suggested, but usually we do not see small lymph nodes if it is persisting Why would you want to do a biopsy? I'm not understanding. Why do you want to do a biopsy? So the biopsy is only indicated once when you want to make a diagnosis. Okay, excisional biopsy. Later on, as a treatment, usually we do not do an excisional biopsy only when if it is causing some discomfort to the patient, it is compressing the main parts and the patient is in distress, then you want to. Otherwise, these are all cosmetic things where you say a small lymph node is persisting and then it's not looking nice and you want to do a biopsy. No, you should not. Do not encourage all these things. Only when you have some difficulty in diagnosis. See, we had a patient who was on treatment for TB lymph node, had responded, but then she developed this multiple other lymph nodes. We did an FNAC that was coming inconclusive again and again. So it's giving different reports. So we one time it said sensitive, the other time it said it was resistant. So we had to be very sure that it is a resistant bacilli. So we went ahead and did an excisional biopsy and then sent that full sample for the culture, and then it reported as resistance. So we treated it as MDR treatment. But otherwise, not a routine should not go ahead with for biopsy, and it's not needed as well.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you for answering all those questions, and thanks for the audience for asking the questions. And I think now it's time for us for the post-test. The same questions which we have seen just before the didactic and presentation from Dr. Sethi, these all, similar 3 questions are there on the screen. Requesting all to please fill up these questions. So I think it's time we can discuss these 3 questions very hurriedly. That first question says tuberculous lymphadenitis is categorized at which type of TB? So after a wonderful didactic by madam, we know that it is characterized as extrapulmonary tuberculosis. So the first option is correct. The second question is that among PLHIV, the most extrapulmonary TB occurs when CD4 counts are. So now we know that yes, this has to be when the CD4 counts are the least, where then there are chances that the APTB occurs the most. So here the answer goes as a first option, that is less than 300 cells microliter. And the third question is that differential diagnosis of isolated peripheral lymphadenopathy in PLHIV can be, and here we have Hodgkin's lymphoma, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, both are none of above, and the answer is both. Because both may mimic the same presentation, same symptoms like fever, weight loss, and often with non-painful enlargement, of the lymph nodes. So the answer is the third option. And for any other questions, if you have with our ART and any other, related to HIV TB, then you may write to us at enishchit@gmail.com. We will be happy to, send these questions to experts and take didactic on that, and take any other case which you'd like to share with us. You're most welcome. And you can send the same on this, email, that is enishchit@gmail.com. So while we have feedback poll on the screen, requesting all to please fill up the feedback poll, and I hand over mic to Dr. Nanya.
It was a very good session. Thank you, ma'am. I thank everybody for joining in also. And especially all the queries were answered. So thank you, ma'am, and thank you everybody who joined us today. And as Dr. Vanna said, please, if you have any questions, please feel free to mail us so that we can get your queries answered by other experts. So there's 1 more minute for the feedback poll and we close the session.